Hello everybody, yeah, it's been a while since the last episode. I promised it would be here sooner, but whatever, it's here now. Welcome to Games, Life, and Horror Season 2, and today we'll be covering the Russian sleep experiment. Enjoy. So yeah, we are starting the season off a little bit surface level, I guess you could say, as we are starting with a pretty popular story. But I feel like that's a good way to introduce the new season. And no, there are no real changes to the format of the series other than a little bit of better editing quality. Anyway, let's get into this. It all starts out during 1940 World War II, where a group of Russian researchers had 5 different American prisoners. They were deemed enemies of the state as they were involved with America during the war. They kept them in the same room for 30 days and wanted to keep them awake for all of those days with a special gas. Since closed-circuit cameras weren't a thing back then, they only had a microphone and a guard watching them through 5-inch glass windows. The prisoners didn't really have anything besides books, a toilet, and of course food and water. They didn't complain about what they had as they were promised freedom if they went through the experiment. Which, by the way, was false. They were going to kill them no matter what, if they finished it or not. But moving on, for the first 5 days, there was little to no complaining. There was nothing really weird going on. They usually would just tell life stories to the others, or just read. But that didn't last long. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances. They stopped talking to each other, and some of them would whisper into the microphone for no real reason. After 9 days, one of them started screaming for 3 hours straight. He surprisingly would have gone longer if his voice didn't wear out and only squeaks would come out of his mouth. Surprisingly, the other prisoners didn't react. Soon after, another one started screaming, and the ones that weren't screaming did even worse things. They started tearing the books apart, and they started smearing their feces onto them, and would then stick them to the windows. Soon after that, all the screaming stopped, and the whispering. After 3 more days, with all the silence, the researchers did hourly mic checks, as it seemed impossible for there to be silent with 5 prisoners in there. Then, on the morning of the 14th day, they decided to speak to them, even though it was against the rules of the experiment. They spoke into the intercom. "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compilants will earn one of you your immediate freedom." But to their surprise, before they opened the door, they heard a whisper into the microphone in a calm voice, saying,
"We no longer want to be freed."
Arguments started to happen throughout the military and researchers on what to do with the experiment. They decided to open the chambers on midnight on the 15th day. On that day, they turned the gas off and let the fresh air come in. But right as they turned it off, they started to hear the subjects in the microphone. They were begging for the gas to come back on. The chamber was open, and soldiers went in to get them. But the subjects started to scream louder and louder. And soon, the soldiers started screaming too when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 were still alive, but they were in such a horrible state it would be hard to even call that life. The 5th subject was torn apart from different parts of their body, such as their thighs and stomach, which were stuffed in the drain to block the water from draining, as 4 inches of it covered the chamber floor, if it even was water. All 4 of the living subjects had a large amount of skin and muscle mass torn away from their bodies. Examination on them showed that it was all self-inflicted. Parts of their insides were also removed, with everything else like the heart and lungs stayed in position, functioning. The food supply they were given had not been touched after the 5th day. as they were eating the flesh and muscle they tore off themselves. The subjects put up a fight when being removed from the chamber, as one soldier was killed from their throat being ripped out, while another one had his legs severed and testicles ripped off from the bare teeth of one of the subjects. 5 other soldiers committed suicide in the following weeks of the incident. One subject was killed after an attempt to sedate him from the medical staff. The remaining 3 subjects were moved to a medical facility. The 2 with working vocal cords were still begging for the gas. The most injured of the 3 was given surgery to fix the fixable injuries he had. But somehow, he stayed awake and attempted to fight through it all. They tried to give him more anesthetics to keep him under control, but as soon as his eyes closed, his heart stopped and he died. Once they did the autopsy, they discovered his blood cells had 3 times the normal amount of oxygen in a human. He also had 9 different broken bones and little remaining muscle not torn out. The other 2 was given surgery as well later on, but without anesthetics after the first incident. I'm going to fast forward through this story as it pretty much has a bunch of different incidents that don't really matter at the end of the story. It's really just to keep it going longer and to keep it, shocking for the shock value. But, moving on to later on. They decided to let them back in the chamber, and right as the gas was turned on, the prisoners went silent and stopped screaming. They were testing one subject's brain waves, and somehow it kept switching from normal to flattening, as if they were repeatedly suffering brain death. Soon enough, he fell asleep, and of course, just like the other subject, he died. There were only 2 subjects remaining, and only one could speak. The one that could speak started screaming and begging for the chamber to be fully sealed. As his brainwaves started to show similar waves as the subject who had just died, the commander then demanded that the chamber be sealed with 3 researchers. One of the 3 who were sent decided to take action into his own hands and shot and killed the commander. Then, he blew the brains out of the subject who couldn't speak. He then pointed his gun at the final subject, screaming, "What are you?" The subject then spoke and said,
Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot treat.
The researcher then shot the subject. As he was dying, he slowly was able to choke out a few more words.
So nearly free.
So as you can tell, that was a much longer description for the story, as I want to start going more in depth into the story so I can get every detail, good and bad. But now it's on to the question, is it real? No. For originality, this was pretty much the first internet story to touch this kind of subject. So even though it's not that original anymore, it was at the time. So I'll give it an 8 out of 10, as it had a pretty big effect on creepypasta stories with the experiment stories. For creepiness, I'll go with a 7 out of 10. It's pretty creepy, but the amount of gore kind of just makes it more gross than scary. And I've said this before, my worst movies of 2018. Gore isn't scary. And for believability, I was going to give this a very low score, as this does not seem very believable. But then a friend of mine read it, and he believed it. Sadly, he's not that smart. So I'm going to have to up the score on this, as some people will actually believe it. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. That gives it a 20 out of 30, which isn't a great score, but it's still pretty good. Just above average, which is a good score in my opinion. If I had more categories, this would probably have a better percentage score, as there are more ways to judge the story than just the 3 categories. It's a very unique story. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Comment down below what you want to see next in the next episode, or what you want to see other than Games, Life, and Horror, because I am taking suggestions. If you actually have suggestions, because I don't get a lot of comments. But anyways, that's it for this video. I'll see you all later. Bye.